morning to you, Peter. It's a busy weekend. Goodness me, the year has kicked off with one of the most horrific stories and scandals I think that any of us can remember in living memory. I think this child rape gang scandal, it's up there with the infected blood scandal. It's up there with the post office scandal. It's truly, truly horrific. Tens of thousands of white young girls being sexually exploited, raped, abused, violated. It just beggars belief how this has gone on. And the extent of the cover-up is, I think, particularly egregious over what appears to be decades. We just don't really know, Peter, is the honest answer.
It's clearly still ongoing. I spoke to someone yesterday, a very brave woman, Janet, who told me about her daughter almost she had a very, very narrow escape from some of the grooming gangs. We know that Oldham Council as well have made a request of government, of Jess Phillips, the minister in the Home Office, to try to get an inquiry into what happened there. We've had inquiries in Telford previously. What is Reform UK's position on this? Do you think there should be individual inquiries into Oldham? Should there be a national public inquiry? What's the best solution here? Or should we just let it be as Jess Phillips says, which I imagine is absolutely not your policy?
It's absolutely vital that we have a full, open, transparent, prompt public inquiry into what's gone on across what appears to be dozens and dozens of towns, primarily in the north of England, over, as I say, decades. And the idea that it could still be going on sends a shiver down my spine, frankly. But I fear that what you say is true. And we need this rapidly, and we need answers. And then, frankly, we may even need prosecutions. I think it beggars belief that Labour are refusing a public inquiry. As far as I'm concerned, I'd scrap the useless, wasteful COVID inquiry and redeploy the brains and the money to this. This is much more important.
It's interesting, though, you mentioned that, Richard, because I spoke to Tom Crowther, KC, recently. I think it was Friday I spoke to him, and he did the inquiry into Telford. And he said that actually, if you do a local inquiry, you get more out of it, because you can have you can essentially go and have a cup of tea with victims. You can go into their homes, you can talk to them, you can see what happened to them, you can talk and what happened, rather than having a very adversarial public inquiry, legalistic courtroom style thing that actually maybe doesn't work as well.
I think you could have the best of both worlds. So you could have a national inquiry, which could have satellite local inquiries, as you've just indicated there, eminently sensible. But what we've got to have is an investigation at the national level into who covered up what, when, how, why. Whether, the care workers, the police officers, the council workers, so many people, local politicians. It seems that many of them knew, and for many of them, because this didn't suit the sort of the lefty ambition of mass uncontrolled immigration, because it didn't suit the diversity agenda, then they were actually they were content essentially to smear and label these white young girls as just a problem to be ignored. And I think we have to call it out. I'm very concerned that Labour politicians have viewed this as electorally uncomfortable, and therefore best to sort of keep it.
Don't you think that Jess,
Richard, covered up?
Richard, don't you think Jess Phillips cares about this? She spent a lifetime. She worked in a domestic abuse shelter. Do you think she's been unfairly vilified over this?
I think that she's got to explain herself, frankly. She's looking at a very, very slim majority in her constituency, along with a number of other very senior Labour politicians. They are worried about the Muslim vote. They are worried about the pro-Gaza vote. That's the reality here, and it requires brave people like us Reform MPs to call this out as it is. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. And I just think we've got to do it, because millions and millions of British citizens are raging, angry and furious about this. Just imagine, Peter, if this had been on the other side. Imagine if young white men had been carrying out these horrific attacks to young girls of an ethnic minority. The degree of outrage, you'd be hearing it from space, for heaven's sake. So this is, I'm afraid to say, I'm gonna say it, this is it's a form of racism, what has gone on over many, many years, possibly decades, and I think we've just got to call it out. We've got to have this inquiry, and it feels to me, I know the general election is some years off, but this could well become a general election issue.
Yeah, I think it is.
Calling for an inquiry, well, Labour could be in real trouble.
Richard, I want to ask you as well about what Wes Streeting is saying, the Health Secretary is saying today about health reform, social care reform. He has said that there's going to be a report in 2028 about social care and what needs to be done. What's Reform's policy on this? How would you sort out the NHS? How would you sort out social care in this country?
Well, I'm actually, in a sense, delighted that during the election campaign, Wes Streeting copied elements of the reform contract to use much more of the independent healthcare system in the UK in order to get waiting lists down. And he's got a bit quiet on it recently, so some of what's been pre-briefed for what's going to be announced, I think, tomorrow, if it's delivered properly and promptly and efficiently, makes a great deal of sense. So let's wait and see. The idea, I've always said that as long as it's still free at the point of delivery, actually using in the independent healthcare system, the capacity of that would grow, that would bring the waiting list down. We've polled it. Most people don't care who actually provides the cure, who gets rid of the pain and the agony. They just want it gone and sorted. So there's strong elements to that if it actually works, if it's not just a soundbite. But with regard to social care, I'm surprised that Labour, having been around for so long and thought about this for so long, needed another 3 years to think about it. I'm not saying we've got all the answers on that at the moment. It's a difficult, thorny one in an economy and a country that is heading towards bankruptcy. So we've got to get the economy growing again, and then we can fix it. But fundamentally, healthcare in this country, including social care, needs root and branch reform. There's no shortage of money in healthcare in the UK. It's just the waste, the incompetence, the mismanagement that is causing the problems we've got. That's why competition's a good thing. Bring in the independent sector, the capacity will grow, waiting lists will come down, and customer feedback and experience will be much greater.
Tell me, Richard, as well, your thoughts on this big investigation in the Sunday Times newspaper. This is in regard to the Britain being vulnerable to ballistic missiles, as holes in the defence of this nation have been revealed. There is an urge from NATO to significantly increase spending on air and missile defence. I think I'm right in saying that Reform UK doesn't have a dedicated defence spokesman in your parliamentary team. Is that correct?
Well, in a sense, we all speak about it because we're all so concerned about it. And when you're just five, in a sense, we all talk about a variety of issues. Okay. But we're the only political party in the general election with a clear commitment to get our defence spending, not to 2.5%, but to 3%. And we actually set out a timeline that we could do that in about 6 years. And I think that's what our American friends, the incoming Trump administration, want to hear. And we showed how you paid for it. And that's because we live, sadly, in a much more dangerous world. And we've got to spend that money more wisely, more smartly in ensuring that the defence of the United Kingdom and our citizens is absolutely foremost. It's the greatest responsibility of any government.
OK, Richard Tice, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, thank you for joining me